Between releases like Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, and many others, 2023 was an absolutely incredible year for gaming. But among all of these bangers, there was one game that really stood out to me personally. I could drag this out for longer, but you've seen the title. I'm talking about RAINCODE. At the time, I did make a video on it with my spoiler-free thoughts based on the first 2 chapters, but back then I didn't know just how much I would end up loving it, let alone that it would become one of my favorite releases from 2023. So today I'm finally here to give my full review on this game. But don't worry, I won't be talking spoilers, and most, if not all, background footage will be from pre-release trailers and stuff. Because of that, the footage in the background also won't always line up exactly with what I'm talking about, as showing too much of an investigation or of a mystery labyrinth might spoil it, but I'll try my best to kind of match it while still avoiding spoilers. As I honestly just want more people to experience this game, and I really hope that the recent re-release of the game for PlayStation and PC will finally give it the recognition that it deserves, even if it once again releases in an absolutely stacked year with games like Metaphor in the same month. And even within the same genre, we got 2 Ace Attorney collections this year. But that's only more reason to talk about it, isn't it? So without further ado, let's review Master Detective Archives RAINCODE. At the time of making this video, RAINCODE is the most recent release from Kazutaka Kodaka, who most people will know as the creator of Danganronpa, and as a game, it takes a lot of inspiration from that series. I'd even go as far as to say that it can kind of be seen as a spiritual successor in some ways, as many of the gameplay mechanics or just the general structure kind of feels like an evolution of it. Because of this, I'll probably be drawing some points of comparison throughout the video, as it's just a nice point of reference. Another point of reference that I'll be using though is the Ace Attorney series, because while this game does have many similar elements and vibes to Danganronpa, it also leans quite closely to Ace Attorney, with every chapter having its own set of side characters, and the murder victim and the killer aren't always part of the main cast. This doesn't mean that RAINCODE feels like it's just redoing what was done before though. It has elements of those games, but it feels very much like its own new thing. But it is a new IP, and I often find that drawing comparisons to existing games is a good way of giving you kind of an idea for what to expect here. Kodaka definitely has his own writing style though, and if you're a fan of that, you will like this game. The only downside to it is that if you didn't like his previous stuff, I doubt RAINCODE will convert you. It's like he said himself, I don't care if my games sell well or not, I just make games that I myself would enjoy. The game is very over the top. You have a weird but cute looking mascot character, which also serves as fan service. The game thrives on its plot twists and the characters will die. And while there is a fully explorable world, it is still a detective visual novel. But despite having some similar aspects, like it has the same composer for the OST and it has the same character designer, RAINCODE does establish its own identity as both a story and a gameplay experience. Even just the whole vibe of this game feels really unique. The atmosphere in this neon-filled city where it's constantly raining is perfect. The game puts a really big focus on its world building throughout the story, and the gameplay got expanded upon, with every chapter having some unique mechanics. There are just a lot of things that set this game apart, and that will become clear as I talk about the game in more detail. The story of RAINCODE follows Yuma Kokohead, a detective in training at the WDO, or the World Detective Organization. And when the game starts off, you find him waking up in a train station, having lost all of his memories. He does find an ID card with him though, which tells him his name and that he has to board the next train to the Kanai ward, as there are a number of detectives gathering there. He's also not alone, as he finds Shinigami, a very endearing but also the aforementioned fanservice character. They board the train though, and on this train a lot of unexpected stuff goes down. While this is a tutorial for all intents and purposes, I don't want to spoil what happens here. As you're used to with Kodaka, the first chapter already has some twists. But as the prologue comes to an end, we arrive at the Kanai Ward, a completely isolated megacorporation-controlled metropolis, where there's no real difference between night or day, as the heavy rain clouds always fill the sky. This place is ruled by the Amaterasu peacekeepers, and detective work is illegal here, presumably out of a fear that they might discover something that isn't meant to be known to the public. This is the place where the rest of the game takes place, and here we also get our main objective, to solve the world's biggest mystery, aka find out what's going on in the Kanai Ward. This is what we're going to be working towards. Every chapter does have its own mystery to solve, but this is our overarching plot that all of those chapters will be building towards. But while the game is about solving the mystery of the city, it's just as much about solving the mystery of Yuma as a character. Who is he and what is his purpose? He just kinda found himself without any memories, he just got thrown into this situation, and while his ID card says that he's a detective, is he really? What does being a detective even mean to him? Does he even want to be a detective? The scenes exploring him and his purpose are honestly some of my favorites in the game. While many moments are very bombastic and in your face, there are a lot of quiet scenes where the game really slows down and where we get a look at what's going on in his head. I thought those were really interesting and they really helped me connect to him as a character. He's just a young guy who's looking for his purpose in this world. And I really like how the other characters tie into this arc of his, especially Kurumi. She has a really enjoyable presence on screen and she bounces off of Yuma quite well. But also in her own right, she's a fantastic character with her own goal and her own arc, often acting as an informant, as while she isn't involved directly with the WDO, she also wants to find out what is going on in the city, and this line of work then brings her to meet Yuma. She is one of his first genuine bonds after he lost his memories, and while he doubts himself all the time, she is there for him to offer her support. And then there's also Shinigami, the other character that's there to offer Yuma her support, even if she does it in very different ways. This is not implying what you think it is, but her character, and especially the development that she has in her relationship with Yuma, is one of the highlights of the game in my opinion. When you first start the game, you might not like her that much, as she's very obnoxious, and I can see a lot of people finding her annoying at first, but trust me, she will grow on you. Or at least she did in my opinion. And she's yet another main mystery of the narrative. Who exactly is she and where did she come from? How did she even come into contact with Yuma? There is a lot going on with her, and in general I really enjoyed her character. She even played a main role in some of the most emotional moments of this narrative. And outside of his relationship with these two girls, you of course also have the rest of the detective agency that you'll be working with. Every character here gets their focus, as the game takes the time to explore each of the main cast in a dedicated chapter. And also outside of the main story, you have these social events where you hang out with them and get to know them. This game even has side quests, with some of them being more focused on set characters, to explore them that a little bit more. More on these side quests later though, but it is quite nice that they're used to expand on this cast. These characters also have their own mystery surrounding them, which you will uncover as you get to know them better. And I honestly really love how they were handled. All of them get their focus and the screen time that they need, not only to build them as characters, but also to build your connection to them. And I honestly can't say that I dislike a single one of them, even if some of them didn't leave the best first impressions. They're all pretty out there, but they're also just so damn charming and enjoyable to see on screen. I wish I could go into more detail on these characters themselves, but with a game like this, I feel like it's better if I keep it vague, as getting to know these characters is a big part of the experience, especially when the best among these characters, like Vivia and Yako, are perhaps the ones that are hiding the biggest secrets. But as you might have noticed, this game has a lot of mystery plotlines, from the setting to the side characters, from Shinigami to the protagonist himself. But the game pulls this off quite well, as every single mystery is interconnected. expected. As you're progressing through the chapters, you solve one mystery and you always get one step closer to solving another. You're just chipping away at this ultimate mystery, and it's so satisfying to see it all come together. Something that also helps with this is of course the fact that the ending is phenomenal. Every single reveal, every single emotional beat, it all really hits me. But where the story does an incredible job at those aspects, there are some smaller parts where it does stumble a tiny bit. Namely the minor antagonists, or the Amaterasu Corporation Peacekeepers. The game has 6 of them. 2 of them are really good, but the rest are... I don't know, I couldn't really tell you anything about them outside of the fact that they're evil, which kind of tells you all you need to know, to be honest. They're kind of like a villain of the week, as every single chapter takes place in a different district of the city, and you then of course run into a different peacekeeper depending on which district you're in. But I honestly don't really care about most of them. They're all pretty one-note and have like one personality trait, and while they do serve their purpose quite well as a roadblock, that is literally it. It is very possible that they were never intended to be more than a roadblock for the protagonist to defeat, but there is some missed potential here, and in some scenes they try to take the spotlight, while I literally couldn't care less. Right now every chapter is very focused on the current mystery, the people involved with it, the world building of this specific district, and the main characters, which is already quite a lot, and that doesn't leave much room for the game to expand on these peacekeepers, or for me to care about them. But while this does leave us with some undercooked and incompetent antagonists, it doesn't really ruin the game, as the other moving parts of each chapter can easily carry it. Especially some of the one-off characters like the witnesses and suspects can be surprisingly entertaining, and they can even be a highlight in some cases. Not every antagonist sucks though, as the director and the vice director of the Peacekeepers are honestly really cool. They also show up in multiple chapters, so they actually have a chance to build their character a bit. Same thing with the main villain, he shows up a lot throughout the entire story, and I really enjoy his presence whenever he's on screen. The game just does a great job at setting him up for the finale, where everything goes down with him, Yuma, and Shinigami at the center of it all. He's just a pretty intriguing character overall, with a great mystery surrounding him, and him, together with the 2 other peacekeepers that I mentioned, play a crucial role in making me care about the Amaterasu Corporation, which is pretty important. So all in all, while it does have some stuff that I'm not too fond of, I honestly really love this narrative. The way that it uncovers all of these mysteries is super satisfying, and it has some very lovable characters. And while I can't really go into detail on the ending, it is honestly an incredible feat that they were able to tie together every single mystery in a satisfying way. Final chapters in games like this are always a highlight. Just think about the ending to any Danganronpa game or the Ace Attorney games, and the final chapter in RAINCODE is right up there with the best of them in my opinion. It is an incredible ending to a game with a very solid overarching narrative, which is kinda what you want from a visual novel, as the story is of course the main draw here. But while it is a visual novel, that doesn't mean that there isn't any gameplay, with each chapter being divided into 3 segments. You have the daily life part, where you're just exploring the city and getting to know the characters, then a murder takes place and you start your investigation, and lastly you try to solve the case in what is called the Mystery Labyrinth. So let's just take it in order and start off with the daily life section. Here you basically just go out to explore the city. Every chapter opens up another district, and while you can still fully access all the previous districts, the main narrative will of course take you to the newest one. Usually you'll be tasked to team up with a member of the WDO, and you just go out there to find information on the city, or just to find something to help you in your main investigation. Outside of the main objective, these areas are also worth exploring, not just for the general world building, but also because you can find certain items, kinda like a collectible, which will unlock hangout events with the other detectives. These are pretty straightforward and nothing too out of the ordinary though. You also don't really have to worry about missing these items, because as I said, once you unlock a district, it's still accessible in the following chapters, and the game actually goes quite far into giving you a reason for revisiting these locations. missions, as outside of these items, the game also has side quests to give you. And while I wasn't too sure on these quests at first, like, side quests in a detective visual novel kinda sound like a strange concept, since gameplay-wise they can't really do much outside of fetch quests, but they pleasantly surprised me with the story significance that they served. These all expand on a certain aspect of the world building, as you're often just helping out the people living here. You get to know more about their day-to-day life, how life is different in each district, and how the rule of the Amaterasu Corps impacts different people. A lot of these even deal with the aftermath of a chapter that came before, tying up some loose ends or allowing us to further help the characters that were involved with that case. In games like this, like Ace Attorney or something, every case always has its own set of characters, in the witnesses and the suspects, but after you find the true culprit, you usually just move on to the next case with a new set of characters. But these side quests allow you to revisit those characters, maybe giving them more of a conclusion or just helping them deal with the aftermath. If someone close to them turned out to be the culprit, that obviously will impact them and they might need some help getting their life back on track. Like chapter 2 for example takes place in a school, and after that chapter, a lot of the students that you met during the main story will have some quests for you. Again, gameplay wise these aren't too special, but I think they're a fantastic addition to make this world feel more grounded and real. Your actions and the events of the main story actually have consequences for these characters now for more than the single chapter that they appear in. There also aren't that many of them, which makes them even more impactful as they focused on quality over quantity. And you can also complete them pretty quickly, so they don't overstay their welcome either. But at some point, of course, you gotta lock in on the main story again, and as you're looking for information about the city, something is bound to happen. Someone will die and somehow you will be involved, and that's when we get to the investigations. And these are pretty similar to the other games of the genre, but the big difference here is that you actually get to walk around the environment and the crime scenes. Which of course makes sense, as this entire game is fully in 3D and fully explorable. But I do think that it's important to mention, as Danganronpa is also a game with fully 3D environments, before the investigations the game always turns to point-and-click gameplay. Outside of that though, these are pretty much what you would expect. Talk to the people involved, gather clues, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the main gameplay segments are of course the mystery labyrinths, as these are the class trials or the court segments of this game. The concept of this labyrinth is that the mystery you're trying to solve gets materialized in its own little pocket dimension. Once you enter, time in the real world stands still, but you're only allowed to leave once the mystery is solved. And as a materialization of the mystery, each labyrinth is of course a different shape and has a very different structure, with the many questions that build up this mystery, like what is the murder weapon for example, being visualized as things that are blocking your path. But outside of these questions, the labyrinth also recreates characters that are trying to stop you from finding out the truth, which is usually a suspect or a peacekeeper. So if you want to proceed through the dungeon, you gotta play these mini-games, I guess, for lack of better term. You're basically just chipping away at this mystery, solving it question by question until you reach the exit, where you will then of course reach the solution. Many of these mini-games will be pretty familiar to you if you've played Danganronpa before. You have the classic find the contradiction debate, or the fill in the blank word Hangman's Gambit thing. You also have the comic book let's go over the case one more time thing. As I said, just the classics. But of course RAINCODE also has plenty of unique ones, with some of them even being unique to the chapter that they appear in. Unique segments like these just make every chapter really fun to play through, as you never know what exactly to expect. This also carries through in the structure of each dungeon, as they all have their unique gimmicks and visuals, but also a general layout that can change, with one of them for example being split into 3 parts that you can solve in whichever order you want, or with another one having a false ending. On top of this, you will also be joined by the other detectives from the WDO in certain chapters, with each of them having their own special ability, ranging from disguises to time travel, so every chapter does have a unique element to it. It does have some drawbacks though, one of them being the fact that this game can look pretty awkward at times, especially during the reasoning death matches. This is the RAINCODE equivalent to the non-stop debates, with truth bullets being replaced by truth blades, and instead of the characters screaming at each other, you're being attacked by the statements of your opponent, and while looking for the contradiction you need to dodge out of the way of their words. Very cool in concept, but it just looks a bit awkward. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's the way that these words fly at you, because they need to be slow enough for you to read them, but they also need to move at a speed that you actually need some level of skill to dodge them. There are also these segments where the characters are running through these long hallways. These are used to have the characters talk to each other about the current situation. They just got past a roadblock, or they just figured something out and they're talking about the implications of this, until they get stuck in their deduction, which will then lead to another roadblock being visualized, ready for you to solve. In Danganronpa or in Ace Attorney, these segments are just portrayed as a visual novel. But here, since you need to progress through the dungeons, you're just running in a straight line while listening to dialogue. Like, I get it, because it would be weird for these characters to just be standing still in a single room while they should be trying to progress the dungeon, trying to get to the next obstacle, but having them run through a hallway does feel kinda strange at times, even if the game is trying to make it visually interesting by having the environment shape itself as we're going through it. It's these type of things that aren't necessarily bad, but they do kind of mess with the presentation of this otherwise really solid case. A bigger criticism that I have though is that some of the cases are surprisingly easy, as I often found myself figuring out some parts of the mystery in the investigation scenes already. I couldn't figure out the whole case of course, but in Danganronpa or in Ace Attorney, I would often enter the trial with no idea what was going on, only to have my mind blown later. While here I would be missing a few crucial hints, but once I had those, I basically knew exactly what was going on. While it could just be the fact that I've played a lot of these games by now and I kinda just know Kodaka's writing style, but it could also be caused by the way that these dungeons are laid out. Compared to those other games with a mystery labyrinth, you need to have found all of the evidence before entering it. Because once you do, you of course can't leave, like you can in an Ace Attorney, where the trials are often split up over the course of a few days with some extra investigation stages in between. And while you also can't leave in games like Danganronpa, there you are in a trial with several other people. No testimonies show up, no evidence presents itself, and you just kind of find out about a lot of information that you couldn't possibly have known about during the investigation. While here, it's just you, Shinigami, and your partner, and you're also just trapped in a pocket dimension. The game does work around this with the special abilities, and a lot of the clues that you find are a lot more cryptic, with their purpose only becoming clear during the dungeon, but you can't really make a ladder cryptic, and since you already have all of your evidence when entering the dungeon, you're just bound to figure out some stuff. Sometimes it's done in a way that made me feel smart, which is of course what these games are aiming for, but sometimes it was also done in the way that I was kind of just waiting for the game to catch up to me, which is kind of what these games should be avoiding. But despite those points of criticism, I still really enjoyed this game, and I had a lot of fun with the gameplay, be it with the investigation or the mystery labyrinth. This game kept me entertained despite its flaws, and I feel like that's a testimony to the quality of the story, these characters, or just the game in general. In conclusion, I just really loved my time with RAINCODE. Even now, over a year after I originally played it, over a year after it originally released, I often find myself thinking back on this experience, thinking back on the time that I spent in the Kanai Ward and on the memories that I made with all of these characters. It is kind of hard to put into words for a spoiler-free review, as many of the best moments here of course come from those points where the mysteries and the plot twists reveal themselves. And while I can't really go into detail on that stuff, I guess you're just gonna have to trust me in the fact that this game is a pretty wild ride. It has some incredible twists, and while it does have some flaws, and while it does have some chapters where the story kind of dips, like this game also suffers from the third case curse, I can't help but find a highlight in those chapters as well, that ultimately made me enjoy my experience regardless. When I played it on launch, the performance used to be my biggest issue with this game, but now that it's available on other devices, that's just not an issue anymore. But I should mention that the game isn't unplayable on Switch, so if that is your preferred console, I can still recommend it. The game is probably also a lot cheaper on there, but you know, this game takes place in a pretty sizable city that has constant rain, and it's filled with neon lighting that's constantly reflecting on all of the wet surfaces, and that can sometimes be a bit much for this little device. I genuinely think that Tokyo Studio has something here with RAINCODE though. This got some incredible ideas, a super intriguing world, and a fantastic cast of characters. Even with the dungeons, while they can still use do some work, I feel like it's a very awesome concept that can reach some incredible heights, as we've seen in the chapters that utilize it best. There's just something about this game, especially for a first entry in the franchise. I feel like it has so much potential. Like, think about the jump between Danganronpa 1 and 2. Many people think either 2 or V3 is the best one, because it took that already great foundation of the first game and it just improved on the things that it got criticized for. So similarly to that, where I already loved my experience with the first entry, there is a lot of room for them to expand and improve upon for a potential sequel, which has me extremely excited. That is assuming that they will return to this world though, but I feel like they will. No spoilers, but just be on the lookout for a post-credit scene. And even without that scene, this world and these characters are honestly just too good for them to not come back to this. And with the end of Danganronpa, I would love for this to be the next big thing coming from Kodaka. Of course, him and his studio are quite busy and they're experimenting with a lot of things, like 100 Line Defense Academy and Tribe 9, but he has in many occasions expressed his love for RAINCODE. And there's just so much more that they could do with this world, so I'm sure that one day we will get another Master Detective Archive title. But that's basically everything that I wanted to talk about. This game definitely has its flaws, but I can't understate how much I loved my time with this back when it was released. And now, looking back at it, I'm honestly just waiting for more of this world. And with the recent re-release, I'll probably just double dip once I find some time. There's just something about it, especially in this age where we get so many remakes, remasters, and sequels. I really appreciate having something fresh with a new IP like RAINCODE. So I would say that it is definitely worth your time. Thank you for watching.